All right, so we are live, and there's no errors so far, so that's good.
We'll take it.
All right, so I'm going to give it a second, and then we'll get started. Sometimes when I change the dates on things, StreamYard and Facebook don't like to talk, so hopefully.
Come on, get along, you two.
Yeah. Oh, we have viewers. So, yay, it worked. Yay. All right. So, let's get started. So, for those of you just tuning in, I'm Kristen. I run a website, my own personal website, which is Keep Reading Kristen. And you can find me on Instagram and keepreadingkristen.com. And also as one of the admin for Bookish Pen Pals on Facebook. And I'm here today with Shawn Peters, who is the author of the duology at this point of the unforgettable Logan Foster. Welcome, Shawn.
Thanks for having me on, Kristen. Really fun to do this and to kind of say goodbye to the longest January ever with a fun thing to look forward to.
I know, right? And we're going to play Would You Rather, which was
Mm.
actually some of the questions were created by my students. So I had the pleasure of meeting Shawn a couple weeks ago in my school because you're a Massachusetts native,
Yes, I
correct?
am.
And you were out talking to the kids about the books.
hmm
And what I really loved about that is you included the kids in your whole presentation about the book. And you came up with a new story in 10 minutes flat because I recorded
Yes.
it and it took 10 minutes.
Mm.
So, do you want to share with those viewers watching a little bit about yourself and a little bit
Mhm.
about the books?
Yeah. So, first of all, again, thanks for having me on. Yeah, I'm
Welcome.
Shawn Peters. My books are The Unforgettable Logan Foster and the sequel, The Unforgettable Logan Foster and the Shadow of Doubt, which is the giant cover that's looming behind me. And they both tell the story of a 12-year-old orphan named Logan Foster. He's neurodivergent on the autism spectrum. He has an eidetic memory. So he remembers every single thing he's ever heard, seen, read, except since before he was 3 when he was found in an airport, and has no memory before that. And in the books, he is fostered by a very nice couple. Maybe a little boring, but they're clearly hiding something. And because the covers are right behind you, I don't feel like it's too big a spoiler. What they're hiding is that they are superheroes. Superheroes are real. Every superhero movie, book, comic book you've ever seen is a cover story for the fact that they are real. So that way, when you see them doing things in the world, you're like, oh, that's a movie set, or that's somebody dressed up. That's somebody going to Comic-Con. And it's really the story of a kid that was pretty sure he would never have a family, finding a family, and a kid that has never felt quote unquote normal. We know that that's not a real word, but has never felt normal. Suddenly, by virtue of being the only non-superhuman in a family, is kind of the most typical person in his family. And it's a book I started writing a decade ago, really for my kids. My kids were the right age around then. I was reading them all kinds of wonderful books. And I, as a life, not a lifelong, but certainly for about 30 years, have been a writer. I'd never written a book. And I said, I wonder if I could write a book like these books that I'm enjoying. And that's what ended up leading me down this path where I now have 2 books out in the world and are trying to get more. I'm married. My wife and I have been together. We're coming up on our, oh my God, I can't believe I'm going to say it, 30-year anniversary.
Oh, wow, that's
And I
great.
have one child who's in college, one that's graduated and working as a theater professional in the Boston area. And I have I'm pretty sure neurodivergent pit bull from a rescue that is the only one that still thinks I'm cool. So that's about it.
I don't know. I think the students all think you're pretty cool
Well,
too.
I did appreciate that. They were great. They were a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. So tell us about your writing background because
Mhm.
I know this book took you the series took you 10 years, but you've been writing for a very long time.
Yeah. So
And very not kid related material, correct?
no. Yeah. I'm the child of 2 writers, so I didn't want to be a writer growing up. I wanted to be an actor, and but that didn't work out by virtue of the fact that no one's going like, "Oh my God, hey, it's that guy from the TV show. He's now a writer." No one's saying that. They're just saying, "Oh, he's a writer."
Right.
Um, but because both of my parents were writers, I was always around words. Like we would have conversations about story and narrative and grammar and stuff, and it all sank in. And so I started my writing career when I couldn't get myself into movies and TV shows by acting in them, I started trying to write for them, and I had a little success in that. I got close to having a couple of things made, but never quite did. And then I started doing other writing in Hollywood, and so I wrote for a TV show called World's Wildest Police Videos, which was like, you know, police chases caught on tape kind of thing. And then I wrote makeover shows for TBS. And then I started writing advertising, but I also, that whole time I was still trying to find new ways to express myself. I used to write fantasy sports articles for ESPN and Boston.com. I wrote, and then I actually wrote for the Boston Globe Sunday magazine. There was a period of about 3.5 years where once a month I got the back page after Dave Barry, after they sunsetted having Dave Barry back there, they had an article or a feature every week called Coupling, and they had different people write about their relationships or trying to be in a relationship. And I was one of the recurring writers. So once a month I got to write about being a husband and a dad. And really, like, yeah, writing a book just came from at one point saying, these books for kids this age are so amazing. They're such good stories. And in a lot of ways, they are less cluttered by some of the things people try to do in adult fiction to make it more important or more something else. And I just thought, these feel like kind of going back to my roots of writing movies and stuff like that, except, controlling all of it. There's no getting to play all the parts.
Right. Yeah. What's that writing process look like for a middle grades book rather than for a movie or a TV show? What did that look like for you?
For me, anything longer than an essay has always, my process has been, have a seed of an idea, start exploring some characters, write out a 1 to 2 page synopsis, and try to poke holes in it. Like, what about this makes no sense? Or why would I not care about this? And if I get myself past that point, then I go back and I write a much longer, you could call it an outline. It's more of like everything but the dialogue. Like I will write like a 13 page, outline, so to speak, that has every single thing that's going to happen in a book, but the dialogue. And that was back when I was writing movie scripts. It was not that different in the sense that I'd get an idea, I would say, can I boil it down to a great log line that I can sell? And then I would say, build out, what are the characters and all this. And only once I would write, I knew a lot of people that would write movies and they would be like, oh, I've got 1 page of notes. And I would be like, no, I have 8 pages of what's going to happen. And then I go in and I see the movie in my head and let the characters speak.
Yeah. Which the book, because I read it out loud to the kids before you came to our school. And I mean, I laughed in so many parts. Like I was cracking up because it honestly is written like a movie. And, for teachers to be teaching a book like Logan Foster, the themes in it are incredible.
Oh, thank you.
I love the superhero part of it because, I mean, as a kid, who doesn't like a good superhero? Yeah. So as you were thinking, I'm going to write a book for my kids, how did you come up with, the neurodivergent main character, which I think is so important that the diversity of students is represented in books as a whole and kid lit these, because and I like that you did say what is normal, because I talk about this all the time. There is no such thing as normal, and kids want to see other characters that they can relate to. Yeah. So where, did that just sort of fall in? Did you have inspiration? Can you talk about the theme a little bit and how you did that?
Absolutely. So both my oldest child and my father are neurodivergent and were very late in life when they were diagnosed. Um, but as I became a father, and my best friend and his oldest son is on the autism spectrum, and this all started at a time where the two families would spend every weekend together,
Right.
and I felt I was very much kind of like an uncle to this boy, and he was my friend. This couple were like aunts and uncles to my kids, um, and it became very clear to me because my wife was and is a public school teacher. She had told me for years about these kids that she had in her class, and this was before even the term neurodivergent really was
Mhm.
used all that much. She'd say, "Oh, they're the Asperger's kids," and when that was a diagnosis and such. And she talked to me about how they were these kids that, like, when she would get her class list and see all the comments from the previous year, she would often
Mm.
see that teachers would be like, "Oh, this person doesn't work well in this way and this way," and she, so long before I knew any of this, she would talk about how, like, these kids were almost always her favorite and most, like, biggest success stories, because she found a way to just
Me
kind
too.
of meet them where they were.
Me too.
So when my best friend's son on the autism spectrum, it seemed really natural that if I wanted to be an uncle to him and such, that, like, I couldn't ask him. He had enough people asking him to make his brain work like everybody else's. And
Mm.
so
Yeah.
being like a good adult in his life, somebody that he could talk to and that he could have his moments with, and somebody that, like, would meet him where he was. um, I also at the same time was noticing that when I was reading these wonderful books to my kids, that I wasn't seeing kids like him getting to be the hero of stories. There were
Yeah.
sometimes a character, or
Mhm.
sometimes if the book was about neurodiversity,
Right.
sure. But, like, in terms of, like, hey, here's this guy, this kid that once again is going to save the world, they all seemed so powerful. They are all in some way, shape, or form the most powerful character in the book. And the kids I knew that were like that didn't feel that way. And
Right.
so that was the genesis of this idea of, like, what kind of family would a kid like that need to be a part of, where they could somehow
Yeah.
feel both powerful and in some ways typical and accepted. And I
Right.
always was a superhero kid. Like, growing up, I mean, I play D&D, so I'm actually playing later tonight. So I have that flavor of nerddom. I love the Percy Jackson books, the
Yeah.
mythology thing. There certainly were a ton of spy books at the time, but I felt like, oh, superheroes, and the idea of a family of superheroes. I mean, ever since seeing The Incredibles, I
Yeah.
was like, there is plenty to explore in that regard. And
Oh yeah.
apparently your dog very much agrees.
Well, if I had him in here, he'd be all up in
Oh my
here, and
gosh. Yeah, right.
no,
I totally know it.
and he sounds big, but he's really like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
big.
No, yeah. That's why he's going to be loud, is because he's like, listen, I'm a small dog. You got to hear me. Anyway, so
Uh-huh.
that's kind of
Totally.
how I came. That's how I came to this place of saying to myself, what if a, a, a kid that had things that were special about them, but not valued by people about them, suddenly became
Right.
part of a family of superheroes, and suddenly was, like, in a place where nobody expected him to change. Um,
Right.
and so that was the basis of it, and everything that came after it was based on, grounded in certain realities, the realities of, like, his voice that most people find very funny, is very much connected to the voice of my friend's son, who he recently just reached out to. I mean, he's 25 now. He reached out to me and was like, hey, can I get a signed copy of the books? And I was like, of course. Like,
That's
without
awesome.
you there's no books, of course.
Yeah. I think, as a teacher, I agree with your wife that, like the kids that are on the spectrum in some way are always my favorite because I want to
Mhm.
see how they work. And when, we were talking to you about that with the kids, I immediately saw the kids that I knew were on the spectrum be like, hey, that's me. That's me. And those kids typically don't talk about it. They
No.
just are that. And nobody, the kids that know them and are friends with them, they don't care. But it was really nice to see that, and I would imagine that, um, a lot of kids are going to read this and go, wait a minute, I have some of these things too. And I can be that superhero because, well, he doesn't have the outfit yet,
Mm-hmm.
towards the book. And I don't want to give too much away.
Right.
But he is a superhero in his own way,
Yeah.
this whole memory
Mm-hmm.
and standing up for himself.
Right.
Um, because he does that in a big way. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm forever telling students, you have to speak your truth and you have to stand up for yourself, and you can do
Mm-hmm.
it in a kind way, which Logan does, except
Mm-hmm.
for that one scene that
Yes.
which I just love. um,
The
and
kids love it too. Not all teachers love it, just because I just imagine it just opens the door for some um, elevated potty talk. Let's call it that way.
so
Mm-hmm.
I actually loved that part because I
Mm,
was reading it out loud.
yes.
And I'm that teacher that as soon as the kids say fart, diarrhea, vomit, I'm like, let's use it in every sentence.
Yeah, sure.
Let's, every other word. And the kids are like,
Okay.
she's
And
at it again.
yep.
Don't say it. Don't do it.
All
And
right.
so they got the biggest kick out of that
Mm,
because there's some fantastic humor
uh,
in these books. So, um, I always like to ask, and I know that you play D&D, and we're going to talk
mhm,
about that actually, because
mhm.
I was asking the kids if they knew, and they got a kick out of that too. But what did you read a lot as a kid when you were Logan's age and younger? Did you read a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I read a lot. I played a lot of video games, which back then, means like Atari and early Nintendo. Um,
Right.
and I also did play D&D. I played board games. But yeah, I always liked reading. I always liked losing myself in it. Um, Only as an adult did I, look back and say, well, it was probably pretty easy for me to read, because it was like talking about seeing yourself in books,
Right.
um, as a white cis het young man, there were plenty of books for me to read. But
Yeah.
but it was interesting. I was drawn at a relatively early age to kind of leapfrog back and forth between books that were written for my age and books that were a bit older. I
Right.
was an advanced reader. Again, that nerd cred,
Yeah.
but the other thing is, I talk about it in my presentations. But I had a little bit of, I gave Logan the superpower of his memory because I had a version of it.
Right.
Um, and I was a very good student, and part of the reason I was a good student is if I read something, or I studied something and I actually paid attention, when I was asked about it, I could not only sometimes remember the details, I could actually remember like where on the page it was or what the writing
Right.
of it looked like. um so so but so yes, I was a reader, but I was also just generally a good student. But I was also like Logan. So much of Logan is me, even though I don't identify necessarily. I certainly haven't been diagnosed as neurodivergent. So
Right.
much of him is me because I was the smallest kid in my grade all the way until about my junior year in high school. And I was the kid that people, the bigger kids, like, if I didn't have like a word of the day to kind of, or something like that, like that was
Yeah.
my identity.
Right.
So yeah, so I definitely did read a lot, but it wasn't all kid stuff, but it also wasn't just like, oh, I'm just going to roll up my sleeves and read War and Peace either. I was not.
Right. What was that one book that you had that was like tattered because you read it so much and you loved it? Did you have one?
Well, I mean, so Grapes of Wrath was a book that I read for the first time in junior high school, and thought it was really cool because I'd read some Steinbeck, like the shorter Steinbecks, and I was
Yeah.
like, I'm ready to move up, right? But I thought it was cool, but there was a lot I'm sure I missed. And then I remember I read it again in college and really liked it and took something very different from it. And then again, as an adult, like I read it again
Yeah.
and got something, by the time I was, working for a living and trying to put myself in the
Yeah.
position of like, if you had to uproot yourself and move your family and all these, and understanding, when you're a kid and you read those books, you're like, yeah, well, God, that must have been really terrible back then. It's a good thing things like that don't happen anymore. And then as an adult, you read it and you're like, that happens to some people 3 times a season somewhere in America.
Yeah, on the regular. Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned Grapes of Wrath. So that was actually my family's history.
Oh, really?
My
You're an Okie?
my grandmother was an Okie.
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. Matter of fact, my daughter's named after her. Yeah, she was the youngest out of 10 siblings, 10, 12.
Wow.
And I have a picture of them in Oklahoma before they moved, and there is nothing. Yeah, they actually owned the land when they did the Cherokee run. So, and lived in a, some of them lived in a chicken coop for a while in California. So
that is the story.
But you're right. And those stories, you take them away. I always loved Gone with the Wind. And then I read it several times and I was like, wait a minute, this is Sherman's March. This is not good.
No,
like,
no.
Not at all.
This is not romantic.
Not good. No,
yeah.
This is not a good thing,
But I should say that I grew up with a lot of Roald Dahl. And then, but the book that the kid book that I would say is somewhere early on, I read the Great Brain series by Fitzgerald. And that book scratched an itch because I was a precocious kid. I was a smart kid. And this, granted, was supposed to be 80 years earlier. And I couldn't recognize any of that. But in some ways, being a Jewish kid, not surrounded necessarily by a ton of Jewish kids, and reading about a Catholic family in the middle of all the Mormons, and this kid that was really smart, and he used his smarts for a lot more mischief than I think I did. But I those books, I owned them. I took them out. I wrote book reports. I devoured them.
That's pretty great. So I know you love D&D. I think it's the coolest thing ever. I don't meet a whole lot of kids who play D&D.
Really?
Which is fascinating because I mean, we're at a very diverse school there in Hadley. But when I asked them, because I've had these kids a couple times, and I was like, so who's heard of D&D? Half of them raised their hands. So I was super excited. So if Logan were playing D&D, what character do you think he'd play as?
Well, I can actually, okay, so book 2, he does. It's a small,
I haven't read book 2 yet, so it's okay.
Yeah. So I can actually answer this definitively. Logan, when he plays D&D, plays an undersized, I believe, halfling wizard named Nagal, which is Logan backwards. And
oh my God, I can't wait to read it then.
And it's not a huge piece of it, but in fact, actually, there was someone on Blue Sky just recently that actually posted the quote from it, where Logan says something along the lines of, my parents made me do an after-school club, and I figured D&D is a place where I'd come into contact with other people that liked reading really long books filled with charts and calculating probabilities. Which is all true. And the guys that I'm playing D&D with when I get off this call, off this live stream, they all like reading long things full of charts and calculating problems. They love it more than I do. Like I'm the Fonz compared to them in that regard, right? Like they love it. So that's what he would do. He basically would recreate himself.
That's awesome. I have to start reading the second book with the kids. Do you think he'd be a good DM? Dungeon master, for those of you who aren't sure what a DM is.
You know what? I think he would be a consistent DM, which is to say, is if he decided he was playing rules as written, those rules would be followed. And no one would ever, like when you play D&D, people are always like, oh, wait a minute, I forgot to add this bonus or something like that. And most DMs go like, oh yeah, well, that's fine. And he would be like, nope, we're gonna play it this way. Or he would need everybody to agree that these are the rules that we're straying for. So he does need that kind of structure.
Yeah.
But he's also, I think, he's not inherently the most creative person, in the sense that he's somebody that has the ability to absorb information. He's such a good listener. And when I say a good listener, I don't just mean for retaining the information, but for like actually being curious about what he sees and hears.
Right.
So if he could do that part and use his own listening to make a more interesting world for them, then he could be a good DM. But I think certain players would say, "Oh, come on, it's just a game," and he would be like, "There are a lot of games. This is the one we're playing, and here are the rules."
Right. What do you think his quest would look like? Because he is very black and white in some ways, but you know, on the creative remember everything side, they might be pretty complex.
Oh, I think there would be some good puzzles in them. I don't think he would be as focused on battle, right? Like combat.
Yeah.
I think that his would be, and he probably wouldn't even be that much about the interpersonal piece, but I think that they would feel very much almost like an escape room in a dungeon kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Where if people were very observant and remembered the things that had happened, they would have a way of circumventing combat or traps later. I think that would be the vibes. And I think that especially with the lessons that he learns throughout book 1 and book 2, I think he'd be very cautious about the idea of a big bad, like that there's just evil at the end of this. Because one of the things he learns between the 2 books, without giving any spoilers, is that the line between the good guys and the bad guys, or what's right and wrong, is often a perspective, but also like who else besides yourself are you willing to think about? Are you just pursuing the thing you're looking for, or are you able to acknowledge that other people have their own things? And so and that's a big theme, especially in the second book, which is where the whole title of Shadow of Doubt comes from, is because there are things you think you know, but then there's doubt.
Yeah. And that's a great thing for kids to think about.
Absolutely.
Especially in this age group. What's your favorite dad joke? What's the one you go to all the time?
Oh boy. There's one that always, that it's not really, I guess it's a dad, it's not a pun, but I do adore the one that it goes, guy walks into a doctor's office with a duck on his head. The doctor looks and says, "Can I help you?" And the duck says, "Yeah, get this guy off my butt." And I just like it because it's a misdirection. But yeah, I mean, but in terms of like a best dad joke, like I love all of them. I love the ones that make anyone that makes people groan. I actually wait, hold on. I may have one that I kept because I liked it. Somebody, of course, at some point. Oh yeah, this is a good one. Yeah, the police are investigating the death of a man who killed someone with a can of chickpeas. It's an obvious case of homicide.
Yeah, that is a joke that my dad would tell me.
Yeah, 100%. Homicide. Perfect. Done.
He texts me every once in a while, sometimes during these lives, and he's like, "Oh, I remembered this," and it'll be some sort of dad joke.
Well, so when the books were first coming out, I would actually go on TikTok, and I don't think I ever got more than like 100 people to watch any of these, but they still exist out there. And I would do superhero dad jokes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so the one that sticks with me from that is how do all the Spider-Men from across the Spider-Verse put their cars on the same street? They're excellent parallel parkers.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's really bad, but it's really good.
Yeah.
So yeah, making those up were a lot of fun.
So do your kids always are, when you say one, are they like, "Ugh," because they've heard it a million times?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're more likely to do that if it's one that they've heard the same one before and I
Yeah,
somehow
yeah,
stumbled onto a new audience. I mean, I'm a remote
yeah,
worker, like they don't
right.
let me out in public much. Um, but yeah, so yeah, they will. But if I spring one on them that catches them, I love watching them go, "Ugh, oh, okay, that was actually pretty good." Right? Like I love
Yeah,
watching them
yeah,
have that knee-jerk reaction of, "That's awful, Dad," except man, I kind of wish I came up with that myself, and now I'm laughing. So yeah, those are
yeah.
that's a good feeling.
I think it's always fun when you have, your kids. It's sad when your kids get older, but it's also really fun.
Oh yeah.
My son is 25
Mm-hmm.
and now he's starting to get it.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I always hated when you said that, but I totally get it now, Mom.
Right.
And now he's a teacher at the school. So which he
Oh,
said he would never do and loves. So I'm like, you're gonna start your own teaching jokes now, or your own adult jokes. It's
it's an
hilarious.
amazing moment where you transition from being the kid person that's like, well, all I want to do is not become my parents to,
Yeah.
you know what, I could do a lot worse than to become my parents. Actually, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm kind of blessed. He's always said I was the cool mom, and I'm like, seriously, I'm not the cool mom, but okay,
Well,
thanks.
you told me about some K-pop things that you're going through. I think you're a cool mom. I mean,
Thank you.
no doubt.
All right, so the students had some questions. They want to
Mm-hmm.
know if Logan Foster is going to be turned into a graphic novel because they would
Mm-hmm.
really like to see that. So
I I would
what's
love
next?
that to happen. Um, it doesn't feel like something I have control over
Yeah,
unless so I'm very fortunate. The first book is nominated this year for the Massachusetts Children's Book Awards, and it's actually the eighth state that it has gotten a nomination in.
I saw
Um,
that.
and last time I checked, there's still only 50 states, although not all of them even have state awards.
Yeah,
So it's doing pretty well. Every year since
yeah,
it's come out, it's had one or two or three new states that are discovering it. If enough people discover it, then yeah, it really would lean very well into being a
yeah,
graphic novel. I mean, it has some illustrations in it currently, but
right.
um, I would I would love to do it, and I would love to go through the process of streamlining it and letting the
Yeah,
visuals tell part of the story. So I think that would be that I would kill for that. I would love for it to be a series,
yeah,
like a TV series or a streaming series or something like that. But us writers, we all have the dreams, and I've already
yeah,
achieved like the one that was the least likely, which is getting it published. So anything that
yeah.
happens after here is unfortunately out of my power, but I still have the dreams.
Yeah, still need to like shout it from the rooftops because honestly, with the
Mhm.
superhero stuff and with the whole tie-in with the comic books, it would be such a fun graphic novel.
I agree. I agree. So yeah, you never know. Talk to my
Yeah,
agent, talk to my publisher, and say, "Hey, what do you guys think? Do you think I think the people that really would read this would read it even more?"
they would.
Yeah.
And I have parents ask all the time, like, should I be concerned my kids are reading graphic novels? And I'm like, no, because they're reading and you can put a certain word count in graphic novels as well.
Yeah.
Like they're still learning, they're still understanding that theme. Like if you're
They're also
going to get
learning.
them to read,
Yeah,
then let them read.
they're
Yeah.
having the experience of sitting down, opening a page one,
Yeah.
and getting to the back of a book. And that, I mean, there's article
Yeah.
after article and discussion board about how the fact that this is a skill that kids are losing all over the
Right.
world, but especially in the United States. So yeah, it's reading. If they listen to it on an audio, it's
Yep.
still they're learning about character and they're learning about narrative,
Yep.
and you're creating a reader,
Right.
even if the act of reading a page full of words is not the skill that they get right away.
Right. And
Yeah.
sometimes it pulls those reluctant readers in too,
Yeah.
because they're like, oh, wait a minute. If this is the graphic novel, what am I missing in the book? Because,
Right.
a lot of times they're so close. But I have kids who read the graphic novel of Anne of Green Gables. And I'm like, if you really love that, you should actually read the book. And they
because
were like, well, do
there's
we have it? And I'm like, well, let's get it and I'll
yeah,
order it for them.
of
So
course.
I'll push for
Mhm.
that
That's
graphic
amazing.
novel. So what's next for you in terms of books? Do you have projects going?
Yeah, so I have no projects sold right now, but I have two different projects that I'm working on. Um, one with that I'm hoping would be with the same editor that I did Logan Foster with, and it's more in the spy world.
Oh,
It doesn't have it doesn't have it has some twists to it. The main character is not neurodivergent this time because
right.
you want to change things up and tell a different person's story. And then I also have another story that's very different from the Logan books, but that I would kill to find a way to get out into the world someday, because I call it my like Ted Lasso for middle grade kind of book,
Uh-huh.
where about a it has some sports in it, but it's also really just about the power of kindness and changing your perspective, and that sometimes you don't get the thing you expected, you get something better. And but only if you're open to it, and once you stop focusing on the things you can't do. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I would that and I don't know who, if or when that would happen, but neither of them have a deal, neither of them are finished enough to try to sell yet, but I'm working on them.
Yay. All right. So let's play some Would You Rather.
Okay, now is this me would you rather, or would Logan rather?
You.
Oh, okay.
This is you, Would You Rather.
Okay.
Because we know what Logan did. And
Mm-hmm.
I tried to make it generic enough that we're not going to spoil it for anybody who has
Mm-hmm.
not read them yet, or
Mm-hmm.
their children who are watching this. So
Okay.
here we go. I'm gonna have to spoil acronyms though, because
Okay.
the kids get a big old kick out of some of the acronyms you
Of
use in this
course.
book.
Yeah,
So and I have to say, I mean, maybe because I am that mom that I think it's hilarious. I liked them. I thought they were funny. So
Okay,
here we
good.
go. Number one.
Mm-hmm.
Would you rather zip line across lava or
Mm-hmm.
stay in Esto and never have peepees? And we probably have to explain what
Yeah.
peepees are, prospective parents, because Logan is an orphan.
Yeah. Believe me, as a man in my 50s, if I could never have peepees again, I would appreciate it. It would make car trips so much easier. But
Yeah, right.
which would I rather? Boy, as I'm not a huge risk taker, but living alone, not having prospective parents, not feeling
Yeah,
having hope, I'd rather take the risk than not have hope. And I mean, be
yeah,
honest with you, I don't think you could be a writer and answer the first one. I know a lot of writers who are very introverted and
right.
maybe would like the solitude, but the act of writing, the act of spending somewhere, for some writers, 2 months to a dozen years working
Right.
on something, and then putting it in other people's hands and asking them to validate that it's not only worth reading, but like that they want to help you have, it's very scary. So
Oh, yeah.
you can't be risk averse. You have to be willing to put yourself out there, because there are no people out there looking for the writers that have kept their great writing to themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So you'd be going across the
I
lava.
Give me the lava, and I'm afraid of heights too. So
Me too.
yeah,
Acrophobia. Um, I that whole part as a mom, I was like, don't
uh,
let
don't let
go.
go. Okay.
The lava. All right. Would you rather have Gil's superpower or Margie's superpower?
Okay. Well, I should explain a little bit. Margie has the
Yep.
ability to turn. She's super strong. She has the ability to turn her skin silvery or metallic, and almost invulnerable. And she has the ability to project her voice telepathically into other people's head. And if she pushes it hard enough, she can mind control them a little bit. And then Gil can move at super fast speeds. He literally makes all of his molecules burst apart and reform in new places. So he can move at crazy speeds, and he can shoot force beams, and he can tell
Mm-hmm.
dad jokes. So I already have one of his superpowers. Um, Let me think. You know what? If I had to choose, I think I'd take Margie's. Maybe it's because I'm already like closer to Gil,
Right.
but also I think I'm actually trying to work on slowing down in my life and
Mm,
not feeling like I have to keep all my molecules together if
yeah.
we're all racing ahead. And be a little more in the moment. So the idea of feeling strong, and you know what? Uh, I get my feelings hurt, so having a little thicker skin wouldn't be the worst thing. And I'll tell
Yeah.
you, the ability to speak into someone else's brain without having to
Yeah.
say it, and they know what
Yeah.
that yeah. So give me Margie's skills. I'll take it. Margie's powers.
I think I would totally take Margie's skills
Yeah.
too.
Okay.
Because I could be in reading group and then I
Mm-hmm.
could use that whole thing and be like, listen, get back to work. I see
Mm-hmm.
you over there fooling around.
Right.
What are you doing?
It's the ultimate teacher slash mom superpower.
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally. Although, if you had gills, you could also like travel.
Yeah. It's true. It's
I don't
true.
know. That's yeah. All right. Would you rather have Gil or Margie train you to be a superhero?
Margie. No, I definitely because Gil is not super confident in it. He's the newer one.
Yep.
And I think
Yeah.
I don't think he's ready to train someone else because he's still working on training himself. Whereas Margie's backstory is that in a lot of ways, before she had any superpowers,
Yeah.
she was already kind of heroic and such. Plus, she's pretty patient, unless you being rude to her, and she wouldn't be patient to that.
Right.
So yeah, as long as training with her didn't mean I had to eat the food she cooked.
I was just
um
gonna ask you that.
yeah, well,
Would you eat her dinners?
no. And my mother, so Gil and Margie are my parents' names. And so
That's right.
all right, and they love the fact that I've named the superheroes after them. But my mother, she gets very upset that Margie is such a bad cook, and I am like, listen, all of you also don't have metallic skin,
Right.
and she's a strong human being, but like you wouldn't
Yeah.
really want her lifting a car off you if you were trapped. And so I'm like, this isn't you. My mother's a wonderful cook. And for her, food
Yeah.
is love. But it's a play on the fact that Margie is not from this planet, and I feel
Right.
like there's always these like, when you talk about aliens and superheroes, there's always this like, oh, they can speak each other's language, and
Hmm.
they're basically the same things. And I'm like, okay, there's got to be something that's violently different. And the idea that like a
Yeah.
person that came from another planet and tasted our food would not taste like what we think it tastes, it just is fun.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, plays for laughs.
Does your mom wish she had some of those superpowers?
Oh, sure. And I think she feels like she does, just
Oh
in
yeah.
the human version of it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but
That's
yeah, but she
funny.
but do not come at her with like, are you a bad cook too? Because then you will see the silver skin and Margie smash. So
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Would you rather
Mhm.
sit next to a size mixer or is it
Necros.
Necros in the school lunchroom?
Is Necros wearing her gloves? Because if I accidentally touch her skin, I die. So,
I don't
but
know. It
honestly,
doesn't
you know what?
say.
You know what? I would still take her, and I'll tell you why. Is first of all, if she's wearing her gloves, or first of all, if I respect her space, then I'm going to be okay.
Uh-huh.
And Size Mixer's a jerk. He is like
Mm-hmm.
he you know he even if he didn't have superpowers, he would not be somebody you wanted to sit next to in a lunchroom. He is
Yeah.
definitely the guy that would steal your milk and tip over your tray. So yeah,
Yeah.
give me Necros. I will keep my respectful distance, and I no high fives.
And hope she's not doing the cheese touch that day.
Yes. Yeah. Hope right. Yeah.
All
Yes.
right. Would you rather fight size mixer on a hoverboard or climb the Argyle wall while the earth split open below you?
Hmm. Oh boy. Okay, so Wait, is Size Mixer on a hoverboard, or am I on the hoverboard?
Hmm.
Because
I
he
think
usually he rides
I
one,
think
but
I think you'd have to both be on one.
okay. Yeah, I'll take my chances with Size Mixer and a hoverboard and just see if I can outmaneuver him, because like I said, I'm not good with heights. I'm
Yeah.
not a rock climber,
Yeah.
and the fact that no matter what happens, that fire is going to eventually get me on the wall. No, I don't like that. So
Yeah,
I'll
I
take
don't
my
like that either.
chances. If I fight
um,
him, I mean, run away until he gets tired of it. So yeah,
run away, run away.
run
All
away.
right. Yeah. Um, oh, this is a hard one.
Mm.
Well, I think because I don't know. Would you rather have Logan's memory or Gil and Margie's superpowers?
Um, I'll say Logan's memory. I'll say Logan's memory because um, I think somebody that really had that ability. Well, first of all, it was a part of my youth, so like
Right.
in some
Yeah.
ways, it would feel like more intrinsic to me.
Okay.
But also, I think there are different types of heroes, and
Me too.
I don't know whether I have the personality to be the person slugging it out with supervillains, but I do think I have the personality that if I had a brain that could do things, I like my brain a lot. It used to be better. It's getting worse, but um, I'd like to think that if I had a brain that special, I could find ways to help a lot of people um, with it. Um,
Yeah.
and that would be, I think that's the kind of hero I would gravitate to being.
Yeah. So I didn't write this one down. And when the kids
Hmm.
actually wrote it, I was like, really? Okay. Because they always ask me, and I'm like, I don't think there's a comparison. But
Hmm.
do you prefer superheroes from Marvel or DC?
I am more of a Marvel kid. Or get person, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that I definitely read plenty of DC growing up.
Yeah.
Some of the Superman and Batman, obviously, and but even some of their kind of like lesser known ones. There was a guy named Firestorm I was a big fan of, but I loved the Marvels, and then when I was a kid, I got sick a fair amount, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that I had huge tonsils and terrible allergies, and so I'd stay home a lot. And back in the 70s and 80s, when you stayed home, there was no iPad, and there was no
Nope.
there was books, and if your head hurt, books were a lot, but there were comic books, and when my parents, I would stay home, and they'd leave me in the room, and they'd go to the magazine store there back when there were magazine stores,
Yeah.
the one next to the donut shop, and they'd come back and
Yep.
they'd give me a stack of them, and I'd read them. And
Yeah.
that's where I discovered a series called Marvel Universe, which it's so funny
Mhm.
because everybody talks about MCU and Marvel Universe, but literally in the 80s, and I think even before then, the Marvel Universe was every month they'd put out a new one, and it was alphabetically every hero and villain in that had ever been in a Marvel comic book, with
Yeah.
like basically a stat sheet, like how much could they lift, what was their origin story, who
Right.
did they fight. And so that it scratched that kind of D&D itch for me. So I
Yeah.
would sit there like memorizing, and having the answer. Oh, I didn't realize the Hulk was that much stronger than the Thing. Oh, okay, right. Like,
Yeah.
and so I had all of those. And so yeah, I have a kind of a closeness to them, though
Yeah.
having that narrative free way to kind of explore them made me feel like, okay, I know them better than just what happens in this.
Which makes sense with Logan
Hmm.
Foster.
Oh yeah.
Because he can rattle the stats off,
Yep.
and boy, the moment he realizes who Margie is,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
is like this whole thing. Like I got that giddy feeling.
Hmm.
I'm 53, but I got that kid giddy feeling when you figure it out. I
Right.
could just feel that for him, that he's
Hmm.
like, wait a second,
Yeah, I know
and
exactly who you are.
Yeah, and then the questions, and then, but wait
yeah.
a second, what's going on with Gil,
Right. Why don't I
there's a
know who
whole
you are? Well, not all of us get
yeah,
comic
right,
books,
right,
you know.
where's your comic book?
Right, exactly. But that is,
You
I mean,
know?
in the real world, that's probably, if they were real, that would be the
Yeah,
case. I mean, obviously it's for a very different age group, but like shows like Invincible and The Boys on that are very adult takes on superheroes, like they really do make you think about the fact that, like, well, if we're in a world with superheroes, there are going to be some like D-class superheroes, like people that like
yeah,
technically are superheroes, but also, man, no one's buying that
yeah,
lunchbox, right? So
yeah,
yeah, so it's funny that once you accept that that's the
yeah,
world, you have to accept the idea that, well, oh, some of them probably are more just like everything else. Some of them are more
yeah.
popular than others.
Yeah, which is like Incredibles too, some of
Hmm.
these other,
Yep.
it's really fun. So, one of my friends, Nicole, is actually in the chat, and we're
Hmm.
at the very beginning, she was talking about when authors come to elementary schools, and I absolutely love that. I'm always pushing, schools to get authors in, and I'm blessed that I work at a one that really loves that.
Yeah.
Um, and then Nicole also said, she's a social worker,
Hmm.
in the foster care system, that your books would be great for the kids in their care. Um, and I agree, because there's so many things in these books the kids can relate to and see
Yeah.
some of themselves in. And
Right.
I think that's important in kidlit. So,
I
um,
that means a lot to
mm,
hear. It's one of those things that I'm very upfront. Like, I am not a neurodivergence or autism expert, right? Like, I we had sensitivity reads. I based things on actual autistic people that I knew, and stuff like that.
yeah,
I did the research that I could do, but I don't pretend that Logan is someone that every autistic person is going to be like, well, he's
right,
just like me. And I did even less. I mean, I know that I got parts of the foster system wrong, because I was like, there are no orphanages anymore,
right,
but
yeah,
for a narrative conceit. But I will tell you that when I do my school visits and I talk to them about neurodivergence, and I talk to them about being a foster kid in the book, and being adopted and stuff like that, I, the kids that raise their hands to volunteer very often identify along those axes.
hmm,
And one of my
yeah,
and it's not about what I say, it's about the fact that I've created space where seeing yourself and admitting you see yourself some way,
hmm,
shape, or form is
yeah,
welcome. And one of my favorite experiences ever, the book was nominated for 2 different book awards in Illinois, and I went to Illinois and they flew me in, and I got to visit some schools. And and it's not uncommon at the end that if I'm doing a signing, or just before, as kids are walking out, a couple of kids will come up to me and they just want to say something to me. And
hmm,
on this day, there were 3 kids in line. And the first kid comes up to me, and I from his manner and the way he spoke to me, it was no surprise when he says, um, I'm autistic like Logan. And I said, right on, man. Well, I hope you'll read it, and tell me what you think, and tell me what I got right, or what applies to you or not. But that's really cool, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you feel like you can be the hero of your own story, because that's the theme of my.
yeah,
And the next person comes up, and they say, um, I'm adopted, and I'm like, oh man, it's really cool. I mean, like, and you just give them the
yeah,
space to say what it means to them, right? And then the third person comes up, this little girl, and she's very shy and she's very quiet. And I'm like, what's up? And she says, I have reflux. And I said, acid, you mean like acid reflux? And she goes, yeah. And I said, that's hard. My daughter had that, makes it hard. You got to watch what you eat. She goes, yeah.
yeah,
And I was like, right on. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed the book. And as
yeah,
it's a funny story, but it also means that I
yeah,
created a space where kids
yep,
were able to talk about what makes them feel different from other people. And
Right.
if that's all my visits do for anybody, then
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah. I think it's fantastic. Um, I'll share this one too so you can see it, because I don't know if you can see the chat. Everyone's story is different and child welfare experience is different. So if you capture some of that
Yes.
identity, even one, you've won. So I
Yeah.
agree.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
Kids like to feel like see they're heard in some way, and books
Yeah.
give them that, even if it's a piece of it. So um I loved it. I thought it was hysterical, and I
Ugh,
had so much fun
thanks.
reading it. Just absolutely hysterical, especially the whole like neighbor scene and the
Hmm.
whole group of kids. We've all had those group of kids and they
Sure.
stand up, you know. So
Yeah.
okay, so Taryn is in the chat and she is asking. So my daughter was recently diagnosed with autism. She's 13, about to be 14. Is this a book that she would enjoy? And what ages is it intended for? Great question, Taryn.
Yeah. So the real sweet spot is probably 10, 11, 12. But what I will say is I've had adults, and specifically adults with autism, that have read it and enjoyed it. It's I think all books of this age, if they're done well, have something for, that, third through seventh grade mind, but that there's
Hmm.
little things in there that other people can get. Um, if she's already moved on to YA, if the books she's enjoying are that, then maybe she might be a little past it. But I will say that I have had plenty of 13 and 14-year-olds read this and enjoy it. Because Logan is such a smart character, also because he's a couple of years ahead. He skipped a couple of grades, so his best friend is a high school sophomore. I think it gives permission for a slightly older set of readers to read it and enjoy it.
That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming
Oh,
on with me and talking
this was
about
so
the
much
books.
fun.
I so appreciate it. And I know my students are going to love watching it tomorrow. They're going to be all over it.
Mhm.
I can't wait to see what's next for your books.
Oh, I appreciate it, and yeah, but make sure your students know that they beat me up pretty good when I saw them, but I really enjoyed it.
It was
And yeah, and if they enjoy book one, I promise them they will enjoy book two. I actually think book two is a better book than book one, just because a third of book one is just getting to know the world,
right.
and the big
Because there's,
reveal. And
yep.
the second book, you're in that world, and things just get so much more complicated so quickly. And
Yeah.
I think it's a better book.
So we're reading that one next. We're
All
reading
right.
Margaret Peterson Haddock's the Among the Hidden.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
that's what we went into next. So then we'll have to go to jump to book two. So
Well, it
can't
means a lot to
wait.
me that they're all invested. But thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank
Oh,
you.
you're
Thank the
welcome.
kids for their questions. They were tough. There were very few of them that I was like, oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
I
good.
appreciate
I'm
it.
glad. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. See you next time.